Hello guys, it's awesome to be here, roaming the old halls again. It's been too long. So I'm Krystal. As Chuck said, I graduated from the academy 2015. In my last 2 years, I ended up getting an internship at a digital agency, and ended up being an employment position doing UI, UX design. That was kind of my foray into the design world, and tech. I started getting restless. I really wanted to do illustration again. And so soon after, about a couple years in, I began my own illustration studio, Krystal Studios, working with clients such as Facebook, Uber, UC Berkeley, Fast Company, Column 5. So some of my work that I've done, for under my studio, and a couple pieces from my final year here at the Academy. So about 9 months ago, I started working at Google, working as an illustrator for Google Play. So how many of you guys are Android users? Okay, fair amount, yeah. So chances are you've gone to the Google Play Store to buy apps or games or movies, and that's basically me and my, the team that I'm on. The illustrated promotional content that you see is what we create every day. And it's pretty fast-paced. We create about 4 illustrations a week, just me, myself. So Google Play has, over 1 billion users worldwide. It's a lot of people. So it means that we have to create illustrations on this global scale that need to resonate with many different cultures and customs around the world. It's really important. All illustration. What's even more important is that our illustrations need to make enough of an impression for users to engage with content, increasing click-through rate, and ultimately, profit for Google. It's all about. So we're essentially like the window dressers of, this virtual store, much like the shops that you see, out in Union Square, just on this huge, massive, virtual scale. So as you can see here, it was not too long ago. It was Play's 5th year birthday, so got to create an illustration off of that. Women's International Day was not too long ago, and that was global. And Lunar New Year, for example, this one was for Korea. So slightly different styles, where a Korean illustration might be more geared towards that market, that style. And it takes place in many kind of different layouts too. You could see web, mobile, different experiences like that. So just a small taste of other illustrations that I've done in my 9 months. From all around the world. So, Carnival for Brazil, for example. Again, I had more Women's International Day. A lot of these campaigns sometimes will create, up to 16, different illustrations to launch, globally. Some of the other ones we have here are the Oscars. That was pretty recent. And Halloween was one of those, big campaigns where we created a lot of different illustrations for that. So my journey into the tech sector was totally unplanned, but very organic. It's something that I kind of just fell into. So, to give you some background, I started going to school at Arizona State University. That's where I grew up. And there's just not much in the way of arts in Arizona, let alone commercial art. I think I just kept on thinking, what am I going to do with a degree, in painting? After a couple of years, I just couldn't ignore that fact, and knew that I had to go to a private art school in a city that had opportunity in a creative field. And San Francisco is one of those places. So, you know, I visited San Francisco, and I knew that this was it. You know, I instantly fell in love with the city. I'm sure, you know, some of you might be able to relate. You know, about the fourth visit, I randomly wandered into an Academy of Art spring show, and I knew that this is where I needed to go. It took a long time to get to San Francisco. It was a struggle for many reasons, you know, mostly financial. Then, you know, I was going to school full-time. I was working full-time at my retail job at Cost Plus on Fisherman's Wharf, and, you know, just trying to survive in the city. It was really hard. I was hungry and stressed out and operating on very little sleep, as I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to. After a little while, I couldn't make ends meet financially. I had to take a lot of breaks, go to school part-time. Took me a long time to graduate. You know, and even going to Academy of Art and getting my degree in something more commercial and, you know, I think being able to really get the technical skills here, I still just had no idea what I was going to do with myself. And this is some of my work that, you know, I had done in those times where it's a little bit all over the place. Definitely, you know, trying to find myself. I was really into these kind of psychedelic, gothic styles. And I met my husband, Ben, Robot Ben, 5 years ago, to be exact. And he was in tech, engineer turned entrepreneur. And, you know, when we started dating, I was kind of like, what is this world? You know, what is this language that these people speak? I was so intimidated. You know, I remember telling my friends, you know, one day, I remember telling my friends this, and, you know, he said to me, one day these people might become your clients. And I was like, no, that's not gonna happen. Like, this world is so apart from what I'm all about. And then it did. So soon after Ben, introduced me to a friend who had a connection to this digital agency called One. And I ended up getting an internship there. And at this time, I had absolutely no experience with Adobe Creative Suite. I was all analog, all about watercolor and oils, nothing digital. And so I had to learn really fast, and I worked my ass off. Within 2 months, they hired me as a UI UX designer. And I did that for a couple years. It was my, like I said, my first foray into the creative industry and tech at the same time. And the two colliding together kind of really changed my world. So designing websites and apps, branding for companies, that was so essential for me to be able to understand the way that illustration can be applied and utilized in a real commercial way, has value to companies. My illustrations became very influenced by the rules and philosophy of design. Illustration is such a fluid communication tool, but while it's great on its own, it has such a special, valuable relationship to design. And I want you guys to remember that. Not only in the, conventional sense, like publications for newspapers or magazines, but within the interface, where everything exists nowadays. So I think more than now than ever, it's crucially important to understand and have a grasp of that framework which your illustrations exist. More importantly, the value that they bring in a commercial sense. So going back to the interface, the thing that we spend hours a day on, our computers and our, phones. Technology is paramount in our society. We know that. But the great challenge is making the products that we experience on here delightful and human. After all, they've become an extension of ourselves. even more when you think about virtual reality. So it's more important to bring this emotive value to the interface, what it means to be human, what resonates us on that, that essential scale. So delight is one of those emotive values. At Google, delight is really at the center of its brand. Google knows how important the experience of delight really is. It helps shape their identity and their personality, and it helps the perception, into this really kind of positive, approachable, almost kind of cuddly brand. Even though, let's face it, it's the big brother, company monster of the world. So people are really connected to the brands that they resonate with, almost on a tribal sense, right? Some people are really, really into Nike, and some people are really, really into Adidas, and, what's the thing that kind of boils it down to that is all of these values that these brands, push out. So what's one of the, biggest tools that create delight? You guys all know this. It's illustration. And when you examine Google's products, the vast sense of it, you'll actually find illustration in many, many places. There's actually a lot of opportunity there. So Google was one of the first tech companies to really understand this and include illustration in their, identity and products, right? It all kind of started with the Google Doodles. But the amazing thing that I've seen just in the past couple of years of being kind of out in the field is this trend of more and more tech companies embracing illustration in so many ways, from marketing campaigns to product, both internal and external, and even in the cornerstone of the branding. So, Uber, for example, they recently did an amazing brand refresh that utilizes illustration to create a richness that carries across, continents, basically. They use this illustration language, everywhere from avatars and products to entire marketing campaigns, their website. And they've done it in such a way that Uber can maintain the high-end identity that they had previously, but it brings in this essential thing that they were missing all this time, was warmth and approachability. So, continuing the conversation about Uber, illustration can also be used to inspire and inform product. This is kind of something that you see on the inside. And that can be through storyboarding. So through this method, designers can actually get a sense of realistic use case scenarios through an empathetic approach, going frame by frame, imagining how their users would use this product. And storyboarding helps so much with that. So in this example, I created a series of illustrations to inspire developers when Uber opened up their API. So they were all launched on the Uber developer blog, and that carried across many different tech sites like Bloomberg Technology. And this was so developers could see these, get inspired, and create apps off of the back of Uber. And another thing is Airbnb also, I've heard, takes on this storyboarding approach for their product. And as you may have seen, Facebook is also really embracing the use of illustration. For example, Facebook launches these illustrations, cultural moments, to celebrate different holidays around the world that appears on everybody's news feeds. And this is so important because it really connects all of us, because it celebrates diversity and inclusion. And that's such an important kind of value that companies are really trying hard to push out into the world right now. And it's also something that we, it's a big part of what we do at Google Play, and it's something that we're always thinking about. And this is kind of a really, really cool one, is that companies are even inviting their users to be expressive in their own way, and have illustration kind of guide that, and, and inviting them to even take part in creating it. So, Facebook stickers or Google Allo, it allows you to be expressive, and individualize yourself through, all of these different kinds of illustrations. Airbnb Create, you can actually take their logo and make it your own through illustration and design. And of course, illustration can take the complex and make it easy to understand. We are such an fast-paced, information-heavy world. So much of what we absorb is, goes really, really fast. And so it needs to be visual. It needs to, really stick. And infographics do a great job of that. So what we can learn here is that, it's all about creating an intimate connection with the user and product now. And illustration is at the heart of that. It's so versatile. It's such a liberating medium that it makes it really easy for companies to leverage those important values that I was talking about. Delight, expression, inclusion, diversity, empathy. These are things that illustration can really communicate. And of course, making the complex, simple and approachable. So when you think about illustration in that sense, the value is huge, and this is the key to a successful illustration career in my understanding, is understanding that value. So, of course, your illustration has to look good, no doubt about it. But that's really only a smart part of it. Companies care about what's going to make them money. And, whether that's from user engagement or to brand recognition. So the more that you streamline your illustration style and content to be viable to the industry you want to work in, the more you'll be successful. For example, when I started getting really inspired by design and I was starting to see these trends in technology and illustration, I streamlined my style to be more graphic and flat. Similar to kind of Google's material guidelines, so I can have more of that opportunity, so I can fit into what I ultimately wanted to get myself into, which was illustration and tech. And content as well. The content that I chose to create for my school projects, for example, became a lot more highly conceptual, more evocative to the themes that I was seeing with illustration being used in the tech industry. So, getting an illustration job in tech. Some key takeaways. It really helps to have a portfolio full of vector work. Watercolor and oils and all of that is great, but at the end of the day, it is the default medium for every project for a good, just practical reason. Vector art is very versatile. It could be leveraged at any scale. It's easy to do multiple revisions. And of course, it's easy to bring to animation to make it interact. And one thing that, I kind of learned, and, I think there's this kind of basic assumption, old school assumption at the door, that you need a representative, you need an agent. But I don't think that's the case. It's something that I did on my own. Not only does an agent take away, anywhere from 30 to 50% of your earnings, but they also insulate you from these business skills that, you acquire when you DIY it. Such as kind of managing clients and managing budget and your time, Not only are these good for being able to run a successful business, but if you climb up the ladder to art director roles or creative director roles, those kind of skills are going to be useful in those positions. And I mean, today there are so many tools that allow you to be successful at this at very little cost. For example, a service like Harvest app is a time tracking and invoice creating tool that's like $10 a month, Zoho is another service that allows you to, kind of manage your customer relations. For example, it'll remind you when is a good time to, to email back that potential client that you've been wanting to, get work from. And as we know, as we kind of learned, sometimes it's good to just bother these people until it happens. And one thing about that is, in terms of, getting jobs with technology companies, they're all about cutting out the middleman. And a representative is essentially kind of that middleman, and so they're less likely to consider you, if you have all of that kind of excess costs. So networking is everything. View every relationship as a potential opportunity. Know someone who works in marketing? I mean, great. Grab a coffee with them and, talk to them, learn about what they do, and see how you could be value to them. If there's an illustrator that you admire out in the field that lives in your town or you're about to visit somewhere, reach out to them. Ask to grab a coffee, ask to pick their brains. Like, they won't bite, and it's some of the most useful things that you can do. And, the awesome thing about it is they might even potentially, refer you if a project comes their way that's, maybe the budget is too small or they don't have time. So it's pretty useful stuff. And so these days, illustration jobs are not just through art directors. I've been hired by marketing people and CEOs of startups and authors and tech analysts. That's kind of going back to the whole view every relationship as an opportunity, because it might surprise you. And streamline your work to be viable, not just pretty. So think about how it communicates effectively in the real world. Go out there, keep your eyes peeled, and see who's using illustration. Keep tabs on that and contact those people. And cut your teeth, work really hard, push yourself into doing the things that really intimidate you, like public speaking. And, the struggles that I had in my 20s, kind of getting through school and living in this city, stuff like that really prepares you, kind of makes you feel like you can, get through anything. So love the hustle. So what's the exciting thing about illustration tech? This is the industry that's on the tip of everyone's tongues, and it's here to stay for a very, very long time. And the awesome thing is, you're already here. It's in your backyard. And so it's something for you to take advantage of. It's important to the longevity of your career, and tech companies will pay you pretty damn well, too. So that's it. Thank you.